War II, January 12th, a German U-boat commander eliminates 14,000 tons of fuel for the Allies. An American admiral arrogantly refuses to take British advice, and the country pays the price for that. German troops say bye-bye to the Caucasus regions. We'll never see you again. The U.S. Marine Division, who took in Guadalcanal and held it against Japanese. They arrived in Melbourne for some well-deserved rest and recreation. Churchill and de Gaulle meet for a two-day conference in Morocco. Task Force 38 that yesterday devastated Indochina. Well, they calculate just how bad the Japanese losses were, and they were bad. And finally, the Soviets launched their final offensive against the Germans in Eastern Front in Poland with 2 million men. Wow. Let's get started. Okay, so today on January 12th, 1940, a German U-boat commander of U-Boat 23 torpedoed and sank a Danish oil tanker that was off of Scotland. And boy, I tell you what, talk about quality versus quantity. That one tanker had 14,000 tons of fuel for the Allied war effort. And, it's funny, if you look back on all of the sinkings of tankers in the war and so forth, now everybody be talking about how horrible of an environmental disaster it was. Uh, I guess when you're in a world war and you're fighting for the survival of your country, environmental concerns kind of take the back seat. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be concerned about the environment, but just in the context of how different things were back then. Now, whenever something like that happens, like for example, recently in the news, this is December of 2024. There was a couple of, kind of like black market, Russian oil tankers that broke up in a storm in the Black Sea. And yes, that created an environmental disaster. I don't think that the Scots and the British were, screaming about how, oh my gosh, this is horrible for our environment. And they were worried about the fact that 14,000 gallons of fuel, they desperately needed that to keep their ships going in their planes in the air to defeat the Germans. So anyway, good news is that the most of the crew escaped. The bad news is that they lost a lot of very precious fuel. What's also precious for me is for you to subscribe to my channel. Click on the little bell there. That makes sure that you'll get notified whenever I drop a new video. I will drop 365 of these videos before I'm done because if they fought in the war on a certain day, I'm going to bring you the highlights of every single day. So in any case, just please do that. I would really appreciate it. Okay. On January 12th, 1942, United States Navy Admiral Adolphus Andrews, may his name live in infamy, had received warning from the British intelligence that there was at least three or four German submarines who were on their way to the American East Coast, and they were there to do damage. Uh, they they pleaded with this very obtuse, very arrogant American admiral for him to immediately start convoy systems and to black out the eastern seaboard. Did he do any of that? No. Well, what's the result? Uh, this became known as the second happy time in U-boat circles. Why? Because there's nothing easier than picking for a German submarine is to pick off unescorted merchant ships that can be easily seen against the background of lights of American cities. And boy, they went to town. And to me, this admiral deserved to have been, lost his entire rank, his pension, and reduced the ranks of a normal seaman and sent to some destroyer to chip paint because that decision cost hundreds, even over maybe even thousands of lives. But that was just, again, we know better, even though The Brits had fought World War One against against the Germans with convoy tactics, and we're doing the same thing in World War Two. We knew better because we're Americans. Right? Arrogant. All I can say is arrogant. But what's not arrogant is if you like my video and click on or leave a comment, okay? Below the screen, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up, baby, and then leave a comment. And that way you will do your very small part, but important part to help grow my channel because YouTube is going to see that engagement and they're going to show my content and put it in other people's feeds and they can discover my content and my channel can grow. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. On January 12th, 1943, the German troops that had gone south when when Hitler decided in 42 that he was going to focus not on Moscow, not the political capital of his main enemy, not the hub of everything having to do with the Soviets. No, he wanted to go for the natural resources, the oil, and so on and so forth, which was not going to win the war. That was, when you kill a snake, you want to chop its head off. You don't want to just fool around with other parts of the body that the snake can survive uh, losing. Okay, and so in this case, this was the FAFO, F around, find out phase, when the Germans were having to pull their forces out of the southern regions, the oil producing regions, the Caucasus, the mountainous regions, because they would have been cut off. Because things were not going well for them by this time, as you know, considering this is 1943, the Stalingrad disaster was still in full flow. So they luckily Hitler gave them permission, instead of just saying, "Hey, okay, you're stuck, fight the last man," and Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. So anyway, that was another notable retreat. And it's going to be all about retreat from now on on the Eastern Front. On January 12th, 1943, the United States First Marine Division. Remember, they're the ones that invaded Tulagi, Gavutu, and Guadalcanal in August of 42. Well, they took those islands and they held them and stopped the Japanese in their tracks. Well, they were finally pulled out, as I mentioned a couple of videos ago. And so today they arrived in Melbourne, Australia. And boy, I tell you what, those boys sure needed some R&R. But if you consider just how bad shape they were in, the almost everybody had malaria. They were just worn down. They were 30, 40 pounds underweight, and they needed a long time to get over that. And so thankfully the Aussies did a great job in providing them with that R&R. And I'd like to say that if you want to, know more about the First Marine Division in a more dramatic fashion, like I said, the HBO series, The Pacific's very good. There's a whole episode on how they were able to get their R&R in Australia, Melbourne. And it gives you a really good feel of how that was. Okay, on January 12th, 1944, Churchill and de Gaulle met in a two-day conference in Marrakesh, Morocco, and the focus was on how they were going to set up the French Expeditionary Force for the Allied invasion in Europe, and most importantly, they were going to talk about how they were going to administer France after the invasion as the Allied armies moved in, moved through France, conquered them, and the Germans were kicked out, how France was going to be governed, and so on and so forth. That was a very important conference. And, Churchill and de Gaulle always had a very difficult relationship. I think anybody who dealt with de Gaulle was going to find it very difficult to deal with him. Very, very arrogant, very sensitive of any real or perceived slights to the French honor. And he was an interesting character. They were all divas, if you want to call it that nowadays. But that conference was going on in this state. And on January 12th, 1945, the Task Force 38, those fast carriers that I talked about yesterday, how they had gone through Indochina like a scourge, attacking the Japanese. Well, I didn't give you the totals of what the butcher's bill was for the Japanese on that attack. And today, the task force publish what losses the Japanese took. And boy, I tell you what, that task force took out 44 Japanese ships, which equaled about 130,000 tons. Tell you what, uh, but this time Japan was just taking body blow after body blow after body blow. And that was a lot. That was a big butcher's bill for the Japanese. And on January 12th, 1945, the Soviets they launched their last major offensive against the Germans. This offensive would, go through Poland and then take Eastern Germany and take out Berlin. They started this offensive with 2 million men, and they crossed the Vistula River. They took Po. They encircled Warsaw about 3 days later, and this was the four horsemen for the Nazis, and it was just crazy. And I tell you what, in a lot of World War II circles, there's a lot of disappointment that the agreement in Yalta that divided Europe up into spheres of influence. And I obviously don't agree with just handing over Eastern Europe to the Soviets to be made communist after the war. If you look at it strictly from the losses that the Soviets took and what we would have taken to take Berlin, you can kind of see why Churchill and Roosevelt, mostly Roosevelt. Churchill was losing his influence by this time. I think Roosevelt was pretty much running things. And it's a debate. What was more important, ultimately. I think that the fact that they knew that they were going to lose so many men by taking Berlin, that was the deciding factor. And the Soviets didn't care, and they lost a lot of men in taking Berlin, tons. So anyway, thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it. I can't wait to get you another video tomorrow. See you then.